Thank you so much, guys, for all taking part in this. So it was just, I can't remember whose request it was to see cash flow modelling. So so Charlotte very kindly and Claire had put their hands up to demonstrate the different systems.
That's not true. You told me I had to.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that's the problem when you become my friend.
You're doing this.
So we're just going to talk about cash flow modelling and show you the 3 different systems. So we've got Voyant, Truth, and Cash Calc. So really, what is cash flow modelling? So it's modelling your client's future. So they have the peace of mind, they know how to never run out of money. And what we find is that when you start talking to people about cash flow modelling, it's best to ask as many questions as you can. So I know like loads of you are going to be asking millions of questions anyway, but it's really finding out as much as you can about your client. So today we've got like a really basic case study to go through so that you get like a flavour for it. But the more you know about your client, the better it is. And there's loads of stuff out there. If any of you have heard of George Kinder, he has 3 amazing questions that you can start asking people about if they have all the money in the world. And then you slowly start killing them off and how that changes what their goals are and their plans are in life. I really like the one about let's think about 3 years into the future and how will you know that we've been successful. That's worked really well with clients recently to really think about, you know, what they're trying to achieve. And really talking to clients about, do they like big picture stuff or do they like all the real detail? And how have you chosen your investments in the past? And how would you like me to help you? And there's so many questions that you can ask people about, you know, how they got into their job. One I really liked recently was, well, how did you meet each other when it was a married couple? And to really find out more about your client, because it's amazing what you can drill down to and find out about them, which can only help you with your cash flow modelling. To put in all of those scenarios, well, maybe they could do this, maybe they could do that. So straight into it, Claire is going to take our case study first, and she's going to demonstrate Cash Calc. So if I stop sharing, over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Madeline. Hi, ladies. Thanks for all coming on board today. I'm going to try and make sure we keep to our time frames. So apologies if I speak very quickly, which I naturally do anyway, but I want to show you as much of Cash Calc as I can. So the 3 of us are all using the same scenario. And instead of going into the full index of Mr. and Mrs. Blue, the scenario will just show you what the inputs are on the cash flow, how the cash flow looks, and also the outputs. And obviously we've all used slightly different assumptions, so these aren't all going to look the same. The figures are going to look very different. I can only see you down the sidebar, so feel free to interrupt me somehow, just shout at me or something and I'll stop. But we'll make a start by just going down the left hand side here. So at the end, I'll go through why I really love Cash Calc and some of the things that I don't like about it. But it always starts with assumptions. So we've assumed an age of 100 and an inflation rate of 2.5%. But there's also some other assumptions down here. We've assumed the clients want to retire at age 61, and Cash Calc automatically builds in an ONS life expectancy because we would have already input their date of births into here. So it's assumed that he's going to die at 85, she's going to die at 88. And then you work your way down the left-hand side here, and a lot of the work and input goes into this savings pot section. Now, this particular scenario, the clients for their ages are quite wealthy. So I've also done a scenario, same clients, but come on to, and you'll see the scenarios are along the top bar here. So as you go down, we start filling in some of the savings pots. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but just to show you the 2 types. This client has £140,000 in cash-based investments. And when you're inputting this, we've chosen the linear growth for this one, and I've chosen a rate of 0.2. It builds in the inflation to show actually it's got a negative real return. And if this was a pension, you could tick the pension box and then add in the pension withdrawal tax rate if you wanted to do that. If we then look at a stocks and shares ISA, so I've assumed the ISA on the scenario is a stocks and shares ISA. And again, the difference here is we've chosen the variable investment return. Do we have a question there? No. Okay. So we've chosen the variable investment return, and cash calc, you can change these. I tend to go with the ones that are pre-populated in cash calc: cautious, balanced, or adventurous. And you can actually preview those growth rates. So it shows you the average growth rate for a balanced portfolio between 1990 and 2021. And it kind of replicates that during the client's lifetime. So it does it over and over again, basically. That's why you'll see the pattern kind of repeating a little bit further down here. So it shows a truthful growth rate, but also for a medium risk fund, this shows an average growth of 6%. And I'm sure with some of your clients, if you've been reviewing them recently, even having the rocky 10 years that we've had, I'm seeing probably average middle of the road performance slightly more than that. So I find that cash cow is quite cautious, but again, I prefer that on the cash flow planning. We're kind of looking at worst case scenario. Again, you'll then just put all of your separate savings pots in here. You can then enter the income and expenses. One of my favourite parts of it is quick add state pension. So literally go to quick add state pension, pick whether they're male or female, and it automatically builds in what the current state pension is, and then it adds inflation to that over time. Now, it isn't perfect because we don't know what the inflationary figures are going to be, and triple lock and everything like that. But it's normally, especially for a client in their 40s like these clients, it's definitely more than they've ever thought about themselves. In my experience, clients have absolutely no idea in their 40s roughly what their state pension is going to be, or even what age they're going to get. So sometimes to just show them that is quite powerful. And this pulls that through on a weekly basis. This client's also got a DB pension that's coming into payment at age 61. If you've got any other incomes, such as rental income or part-time work in retirement, you can input those into there very easily. And then the expenses that have been put in, this client has said that they want to spend $4,600 a month. Again, you build in inflation, and they want to upgrade their car every year at £15,000. Contributions and withdrawals, and these clients are paying into their ISAs and their pensions on a monthly basis. So we've input that into here. The one thing that I do on cash calc, and there's some caveats that I should have gone through at the start that I'll quickly touch on now. You can use cash calc and probably Voyant in Truth in your own way, and you can simplify it. And I oversimplify my cash flow planning for clients, largely because most of my clients are at retirement. I can add a bit more complexity in if they are younger, but really what I'm looking at is a picture at retirement here. You having a look at their resources now, and then projecting forward as to what they are. But what I don't do is put detailed income and expenditure in at this stage. I tend to get the clients to do that on a separate spreadsheet. And the reason I've chosen to do that, it simplifies my input, but also I've tended to find when they have done an expenditure spreadsheet, even if they have got £1,000 a month spare, they usually spend it. And that throws my cash flow planning out. So instead, if they're saying to me, actually, yes, Claire, we have £1,000 spare, but really being realistic, we only want to save £200 a month of that, I can build that £200 a month contribution into here. What's really important though is that I include that as an external contribution. If I did include it as a personal contribution, it would take a negative figure from this current account here, and it would throw the cash flow out. So you do have to find your own quirks, as you will with any system, but I just wanted to add that as a caveat for any of you cash calc users that might be thinking, what's she doing? I don't use it like this. So we do sometimes do it for clients pre-retirement, but this is how I tend to simplify it. And how I charge for cash flow planning is it's a little bit less because I simplify the inputs. You can build charges in here, initial and ongoing, fixed or percentage, very, very easily. And then this is the screen that I always go through with clients. So first of all, it's the money in, money out page. So basically what we're showing here, this is the client's final salary pension. These are the state pensions. And then the green is money that we are pulling out of these savings pots over time in order to meet their goals. So you'll see the little spike here represents that car every 5 years. The rest of it is money that's just required to meet their expenditure requirements, which is around 55,800 every year. So what we're really looking at here is, in those savings pots, is there enough to actually last them throughout retirement? We've taken them up to age 100. As you can see, there's no white spaces here, and that means that they can afford their retirement, which we presumed would be the case with this particular client. What's really interesting, though, for these clients is this savings over time button. And this shows all of those different pots that we've looked at and how they go down or up over time. And depending on how you choose the order, you can move the order of these around. So you might want to be accessing the cash first or the pension first, depending on what your advice is. That will change these around. But what's very useful is to hover around their life expectancy age and give them a rough idea of their assets and what they might be worth. Obviously, we haven't included the property in this one, but you can. CashCalc also have a very good IHT tool that I prefer to put in all of the assets in. But overall, this gives the basics of the cash flow. And although these clients have got enough, we can clearly see that. What I thought was really interesting is, if we gave them a bit of advice, how might we change this picture for them? And as you can see, just by doing some very basic things, and bear with me 1 second while I remind myself what those basic things were. So using some of the business monies to make a lump sum contribution. So he had some business monies, we've taken money out of there to make a lump sum contribution to his pension. Then using some of the personal monies to make contributions in the following year. And again, we've kind of put these into contributions and withdrawals on here to reflect that. And again, apologies me speeding through, but this is just some really basic advice. And then also we've looked, because he's self-employed, we've recommended that he puts 40,000 a year contribution into his pension, because he wasn't doing that. So if we compare the savings over time at around age 86 here, if we go for his age 86, total assets after advice were around 4.3 million. Whereas if we just left with what they had previously, that is more like 2.2 million. So even though these guys have got enough, there is still massive value that we can add to make their financial situation better. Now, there's a lot of advice that throws up then, lifetime allowance, inheritance tax, and lots of other things. But it just goes to show how, I suppose, we can help those with enough. Madeline, Charlotte, are you keeping an eye on time? Have I got time to go through the example with less, or?
I'm not.
Shall I quickly whiz through this?
Just before you move on, there's been a conversation in the chat. Sophie was asking, you know, the button where you've got stress testing in Monte Carlo. Do you use it? Do you do anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a really useful tool to do, actually. So I can do it live with you now, and I've done it with a client this morning. There is almost a stress test already built into this, especially the fact that it takes 2020 into consideration. So I always feel that the stress test is kind of adding in a double whammy. However, it is really interesting and you can add it in. So the market events that you can simulate are the 2007 market crash. I tend to choose this one because I think it's unfair to just simulate a crash and not simulate the ongoing recovery. So I simulate this. I'll normally choose kind of a pivotal age. So let's just say they wanted to retire at 61. So let's simulate the world ending at 61. And then you choose which accounts to simulate that on. So obviously it would just be the market-based one. Run that simulation at that age. And if it does like me, bear with me, there we go. So it shows this big drop here, which does show a significant drop in the cash flow. But because these clients have got so much, it just really shows a dent, and then things still carry on as normal. If clients do have less, that stress test really can show a significant impact to their wealth. And often on DB cases, well, always on DB cases, we will always put a stress test in because it's important that the client has had experience of the market, yes, but also a double whammy of market crashes. Does that answer that question? Sorry, I can't see the chat box with the screen sharing.
I am mute, so that wasn't helpful. So I think Sophie was asking whether or not Monte Carlo is more comprehensive than the historic record method. Sorry, do you have that on Cash? That's not language that we use on Voyant. So
no, I'll be really honest, I haven't used the Monte Carlo simulator, but I've heard it talked about a lot, and it's probably something that I could have a look a little bit more into. But no, I haven't used that as yet, so it'd be interesting to have a look at how that actually works.
I think the answer to Sophie's question is none of us know, because none of us do it.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But I might have a play around with that. It's a good question.
Yeah. That's, I don't know, Madeline, how are we with time?
We're at 20 past. So, Claire, did you want to show what you do about IHT?
Yeah, I think the example with less might, if I can quickly show that, the IHT, I don't think it's particularly fantastic on Cash Calc, and we were just having a conversation offline before that sometimes we sit down and scribble IHT and work it out manually, but I think that Voyant and Truth might have a stronger IHT, but I'm happy to go over it if you think it would be useful. Yeah,
do you just want to do it for like 2 minutes or something?
Yeah, sure. Okay. The one thing that's I think is really useful with clients is the example when people have got less, and that's generally my clients. They generally don't have enough to retire on. So when you do it, it shows this big white space here, which means they can't afford retirement. But there is usually something that we can do to actually bridge that gap and make the money last longer, and that might be contributions or reducing their expenditure. In this case, I've done a combination of reducing his car from 15 to 10 grand every 5 years and paying in on a monthly basis up until age 61, and it bridges quite a lot of that gap. So that just shows you a little bit more for those clients that haven't quite got enough. If I just now show you the IHT tool very quickly. So Cash Calc has a number of, apologies, should have had it on presenting mode. 1 second.
Data breach, data breach.
Okay, we'll start again. Apologise. Bear with me 1 second. It has got a very good presentation mode as well, which clearly I wasn't using. So if we just have a quick, I'm just going to pull the client back up before I screen share again. Okay, here we go. So there's a number of planning tools that you can use with Cash Calc, and I probably only scratched the surface of what I use. But the IHT planner allows you to input all of the assets and then calculate what the potential IHT will be. So in this scenario, we've assumed that Miss is going to die at 86 and Miss is at 88. You can pull these levers around. You add in the assets and the average growth rate. What I don't like is that these are linear growth rates, and apparently they are going to be adding in variable growth rates to that. You can put in liabilities, but what that then does is it brings it forward and explains at age 88, taking various assumptions into consideration, what the inheritance tax might be based on the current levels of liability. So we can see there's potentially a 750 grand IHT bill there as things stand at the moment, but obviously with our advice we can significantly reduce that with a variety of different planning needs. So that's more detailed. I wanted to speed through it, but it does give you quite a good and useful inheritance tax planner there. So to wrap up my session, any questions before I just wrap up?
I'd say just while we're waiting for questions to come in, if anyone's got any, just to like, because while we're talking about it, it makes it easier for me to spot them. So the things that are different on Voyant, like quite different, are, you know, you talk about linear versus variable growth rates on various things. My understanding is Voyant only do linear growth rates across the board. They don't have like variable options. They don't pull through ONS expected mortality. You just pick a year. Everyone in Voyant dies at 100, and your market assumptions that come through where you're simulating the market crashes, Voyant doesn't offer you anything like that. You have to pick specific, like, oh, so in year one it's dropped by 30%, in year two it's dropped by 21%, and a lot of people would just use the 5-year model of 2008. I avoid it, so it doesn't have as much live feed. Does yours, Claire, does it live feed the state pension age?
Yeah, live feed from the date of birth, so it will pick that up, pick up the state pension as it is at the moment. I mean, what I really like about it is the variable, but one of the things I don't like is that you can't plug in the investment strategy you use or you're recommending, which I think would make it a little bit more meaningful. So if I'm recommending a certain investment strategy, if I could pull that through. Now, apparently there is a way you can do that on model portfolios. You can build your own portfolios in. We don't build our own portfolios, but I'm quite excited about Cashflow's integration with FE. So they've just been bought by FE Analytics, and hopefully that will make even more of that data pull through to make the actual cash flow a bit more meaningful for clients. My clients really like the simplicity of Cashflow, and I will use that at the initial stages as well as at review meetings. And it's been so useful during COVID to show clients, even in March last year, it wasn't impacting their overall financial plan as bad as it was. Actually, they could still meet their financial goals, even though we were in a terrible time. And now that's recovered and I'm doing reviews again a year later, it looks phenomenal. And it just shows the resilience of the markets, I think, but also the resilience of their plan. And actually these stress tests that we're building in are an important way to show them that their current plan is quite resilient. I don't like the fact there's no variable returns on IHT, but I'm sure that will come. I love the cost of Cashflow. It's £50 per user per month with a free power planner license. So there's 4 of us as advisors, so we get 4 free power planner licenses, which is really helpful. The support's fantastic, so you can ring them up and get to speak to a human straight away, and they'll just jump straight on your Cashflow and help you. And again, I think that support's going to be hopefully improving with FE, but it's already very, very good. And the client portal, the clients filling in their fact find, I use IO and Cashflow. I've trialed the IO PFP fact find and I've trialed the Cashflow fact find, and my clients anyway, much prefer the Cashflow fact find. They fill in the Cashflow fact find a lot easier. They log in easier, even though it's incredibly secure. And I can configure the fact find much easier. I can add in, the little things that we do that are quirky in our business, such as what drinks do you like, so we can get them a drink prepared when they do come in the office. And we get some quite funny answers from clients there, like gin and tonic or whatever it might be. They get teas and coffees, but it still just allows you to have a little bit of interaction with the client, maybe before they've even come in. Again, I'm going
to have to interrupt you because we're now at 5:30.
No problem at all. That's absolutely fine. I have covered off more than I thought I would. So thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte.
There's a couple of questions, but I think we'll just have to cover them off towards the end, because I'm just really conscious that now we are running out of time. Okay, so we'll just park those questions for now. Right, let me share my screen. Oh, you've been so long, Claire, it's logged me out. Hang on. Right, here we go. Ready, team. Right, full disclosure on this, guys. I did this in about 20 minutes this morning, so let's all be kind, because the baby has been mean to me of late, so life is a mess. Right, so here's the inputting screen for Voyant. So firstly, just similar to what Claire has done, I'm just going to show you what the input screen looks like when you are building a financial plan on Voyant. So first things first. Oh, and also I have been trained in the school of Andy Hart. So I've done his Voyantist training, the day courses. So this is, I think, one way of using Voyant. You can obviously use it in loads of different ways, but I do it the Andy Hart way. So if you've got a problem with it, take it up with him, because that's where I learned. So these, firstly, you input your people. So I've called them light blue because I've already got a Mr. and Mrs. Blue on mine. So Mr. Light Blue, Mrs. Light Blue, and their son, who is on there for education planning. So we just add them in. And then in terms of financial information, obviously income's fairly straightforward. The rental income's linked to the buy-to-let property that they've got. Savings and investments, you can see the pots down here. So it does, although it looks very different, it does mirror what Claire had input. So they've got joint savings of 140,000 in cash, business cash of £60,000. Something to note up here is it automatically provides you with sweep accounts. These are a system default, and the reason they provide those is functionality, because you can build in sweeps. So for example, you can assume that any liquid cash that isn't spent and is in excess of what they need in 1 year can be swept into wherever you put it. So for example, I quite often assume it will be swept into pensions as additional pension contribution, or swept into ISA as additional ISA contributions. So that's just system functionality. Properties obviously down here, so main residence and their buy to let. There's little links / paper clippy pictures because there's linked debts on those for the mortgages, which are down here. So the main residence mortgage and the buy to let mortgage that are down here. Pensions, just manually inputting. I have no quick add buttons like Claire had. So where it comes to state pension, it doesn't yet filter through the accurate state pension age, and you literally put in a number. So again, going back to my Andy Hart school of learning, he's always erred on the side of caution, so always go slightly under what the maximum is that they can get. And then in terms of expenses, very much like what Claire said, although I get from clients a spreadsheet of expense information, so I'll literally ask them to nail down all of their monthly expenditure, I do not plug that into Voyant. That exercise is completely separate and is more of a for clients to start to understand how they're spending their money, getting to grips with where they're spending their money, and really analysing their spending habits, and also then, you know, modelling that forward to, you know, oh, well, you say that you spend X, but actually you're spending Y. We have that conversation separate to this process. So actually under the expenses, all it's got here is a new car every 5 years, and then the rental expenses. So what we do in terms of expenses, Andy Hart School of Learning, again, remember people, is actually building lifetime goals. So instead of saying, you know, their expenses are X, Y, Z, what we say is they need X amount every month for the rest of their lives. And obviously that's inflation proofed, etc. So it treats it as a goal rather than as individualized expenses. And then the milestone goal here was to do with an education cost that Claire built into hers as well. So basically what it shows is, you know, lifetime expenses and education costs. You could also build in anything extra that you needed as additional goals, and it starts to show you the progress. So this one was easy because they've got far more money than they need, but quite often it will show you, you know, 100% on one of the goals and then maybe like 86% on another one. So you start to get the feel for the fact that they're not going to have enough based on the system assumptions. And lastly, I very quickly with clients show them the plan settings, but literally only as far as to show them the fact that the really important one on here is the relationship between the inflation rate and the investment growth rate. And I keep it super straightforward. I don't, like, I literally just explain, you know, we're talking about 2% growth year on year above inflation. And I think Madeline said the same thing. We don't include any advice fees when we build these plans or product fees. Like, the whole point of this is to keep it as simplistic as possible. The more you try and complicate cash flow modelling, the more it's just meaningless, frankly. So that's the input page. Just checking that I said all my stuff. Yep. So then we go on to the timeline. And again, this is super straightforward. But we've got the plan start here, plan end here. And I always say, here's the day you die with your little tombstone. It's very depressing. And so, yeah, we assume everyone lives to 100 in Voyant, because I would rather assume people live longer than they actually do. So yeah, we don't have the ONS feed that Cashcalc have, but I think even if I had that functionality, my default would still be to go to 100, because what we're looking at here is always worst case scenarios, isn't it? What's the worst case scenario in terms of running out of money? Well, living longer than you planned for. So I would always edge towards the end of that anyway. Then we've got their retirement. They both wanted to retire at 60, and then we've got the education costs for when their son's at university here. And obviously you could add in whatever other events were relevant for these individuals. You can choose to add in long-term care down the bottom end. I never model that because it's just too unknown. It was just so I think it's meaningless trying to model long-term care, because you just have no real idea what that's going to look like. And obviously you can add other stuff up here. So yeah, just show the timeline, and then we go to the let's see. So blue in Voyant is good, red is bad. So as we've already established from Claire's model, this couple effectively never run out of money based on their needs. So the black line shows their income needs over the course of their lives. And the reason it drops off significantly around 60 is when they retire, is because of Voyant takes into account taxation, whereas I understand, Claire, jump in if I'm wrong, I understand Cashcalc doesn't take into account income tax. So it makes quite a big difference, obviously, for them from taking into account all their employed income, etc. Is that right, Claire?
there is a workaround to it, so you can quite easily put it in either as an expense, or if it's on a pension withdrawal, it does include it on pension withdrawals. Yeah, I don't think it's as accurate, but they have changed it quite recently, so it does include taxes now, and apparently that's improving too.
Yeah, whatever. All right, that's fine. So yeah, so that's why it shows quite a big dip at 60, and then as similar to what Claire had on hers, you can see the spikes every 5 years for that car expense. So then what I do when I'm modeling this to clients is I'd say, okay, great, there's no red, so that's brilliant. So then what we do is show the details and build that plan out. So I strip out every single piece of income and just show it as a complete blank slate. But that black line is still showing that income need. So at the moment, we're assuming they've got no money coming in at all, ever. And then we start to build that out so they can really understand what that means. So first things first is their employment income. So we know that their employment income is going to tide them over until Mr. retires. So we've got no concerns there or shortfalls. Then I always put the state pensions in first because of the most secure form of pension income, obviously. I will then add in any DB pensions, which is this little green bit here. So she's got a DB pension, I think, from the case study. I then got other income. So in this example, that's rental income on their buy-to-let property. And then lastly, we use their, more liquid assets to plug the gaps. So we show the savings and investments. And in this model, they've got such big savings and investments, it basically plugs their entire gap for life. And then just money purchase pensions are automatically on Voyant assumed to be used last. You can change those, but it assumes that you use liquid assets from an inheritance tax perspective first, and you keep money purchase pensions as long as possible, for obvious reasons. So I just show that first, and then I show a dual chart. So on the top chart, it shows cash flow, and on the bottom one, got things are going everywhere. The bottom one, it shows the relationship between how the cash flow is being built out and the impact it's having on assets over their lifetime. So it would show, for example, this one's not too dramatic, but on some it will show, for example, that the assets are significantly reducing, even though cash flow is being met. So you can say, well, okay, we know that your cash flow is being met, but we are seeing a massive reduction in your assets. Alternatively, you could see cash flow being met, but actually assets still increasing significantly. So from there, you can sort of draw assumptions along the lines of, well, actually, you could, be spending more money. So that's that screen. I then jump to insights. And so I'll come back to you on this, Claire, because someone asked a question about this just at the end of your session. But insights are really useful for showing like simulated scenarios. So for example, what investment return? So I showed you on the assumption we assume 5% return on all of their investments. It shows you what rate of return they need for their life to not run out of money. So this is particularly useful for if there is a shortfall. I said, okay, well, if we invest all of your money, what return do we need? And if it comes out with something stupid, like 15% rate of return, you know that they just don't have enough invested. You know that you've got to do more work around that. Whereas the required rate of return here is fairly reasonable, so that's fine. The other ones that are really useful, again, if there's shortfalls, you can say, okay, well, how much extra do you need to put aside annually or invest annually to plug that red gap at the end? And you can run that simulation and it will say you need to make annual savings of, I don't know, £4,000 extra in order to plug that gap. Same concept, but instead, how much would you need to invest today as a lump sum to plug that gap? And then it has, Sophie was asking about market crashes. It's here. I don't use it. I think it's just opening a can of worms. I do the retirement spending because I mostly do at retirement planning. So this shows the maximum people can have in retirement based on this scenario. And again, it works really well if I actually like it when people have got too much money and you can say to them, all right, well, you've told me you need 40 grand per annum to live comfortably. But actually the system's saying you can have £67,000 annually. So actually you can spend much more money than you think you can. So that's a really fun conversation to have. And then there's the legacy asset, the legacy page, sorry. So this is where you start looking at the IHT calculations. So automatically assumes that Mr. dies first, all goes to Mrs., then gets left to son, then demonstrates the tax and what would be payable. That's if they both died today. And you can model it forward to a planned legacy if they die at 100. Again, I don't concentrate too heavily on this screen because I'd rather look at the inheritance tax situation with the client and actually discuss the individualized assets rather than use the system. And then lastly, I haven't built any like Claire has, but this is where I would then go on to build what if scenarios. So I always explain what I've just done as the base plan or the master plan, which is the do nothing scenario. If you do nothing from today, this is what we're, modeling forward as a snapshot in time. And then we move to what if. So what if, for example, we then looked at being more tax efficient and investing your liquid cash and using all of your pension and ISA allowances, and swept all of that extra cash into investments as and when it comes up. Invest tax-free cash as you come into it from the DB scheme, etc. That's where I would probably build that in. I would then do a what if scenario. What if husband dies, in 5 years' time? What if Mrs. dies in 5 years' time? And then any other relevant ones that are specific for them. And just very last thing is you can run off the reports really quickly from here, and they're actually good. So I should have said, for anyone who's familiar with them, I don't use Voyant Advisor, which is the old style scheme. This is specifically Voyant Go, which is their desktop scheme system. They are pushing everyone towards moving Voyant Go going forward. They are not investing any more time or effort in building out Voyant Advisor. So it's really good to just accept defeat and use this system, even if you're used to using Voyant Advisor. But actually, I think people prefer it anyway, because you couldn't, as I understand it, build very good reports from the old system, whereas this one's pretty good. So let me I'll just do that quickly. I can't see because my cameras are in the way. I keep having to move all your heads around. Hang on. Oh no, I can't get to there we go, add to report. That's the button I couldn't get to. Oh, now I've got to move it out of the way again. So yeah, you can just run it off, and then I'll just show you super quickly the PDF that comes out of that. And then that's all I was going to show you for today. I can see there's lots of orange things. Are there any questions, Madeline?
You're all right for now, thanks, Charlotte.
Oh, okay, that's fine then.
Well, someone was asking about your, they want to know which bank you bank at, because your savings rate assumption is very high.
Yeah, so I use the assumptions again that Andy Hart gave me. So he uses 1.5%. And I queried him on that because I was like, that's nice. So his view on that is 1.5% is high now and has been for the last 5 to 10 years. 1.5% is not going to be high if we model it forward for the next 100 years. So it's a fairly lazy approach, but I actually kind of take his point on that. This is what the reports look like, just very quickly.
Is it allowed
to just come out as a PDF?
Yeah. And at the moment, until I'm more sophisticated, I literally provide this as their financial plan report. And I deliberately explained to them that, let me stop sharing my screen now because that's what I wanted to show you. And I deliberately explained to them that I don't provide detailed financial planning reports because they're a snapshot in time. And I feel like if you say to people, you're absolutely fine, you're never going to run out of money, people will take that as, that's what we're assuming for today and it all looks fine. People will take that as like, oh, okay, well, they did this financial planning exercise 10 years ago and that said it was fine. And we've not gone back to repeat it. But like, that's fine. Like, obviously, we know things change year on year. So cash flow modelling is just a snapshot in time. So I don't like to provide detailed reports because I think people rely on it too much. I'd rather they come back and do the live system with me and we retest the situation.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Charlotte.
Right.
Do they do it in a Word version? Someone's just asked.
I don't think so.
Okay. Truth do, they're awesome. Anyway. Right. If I share my screen and how do I get out of this? Okay, so this is Truth. One thing I really like about it, and this is really, really girly, is you can customize the colors. So mine's all purple because I'm pink and purple, all my logos and stuff. But so going through it like Cash Cal and Voyant, you just input absolutely everything about the client in here. So this just shows all their savings, investments, pensions, property, and their liabilities. And then they've got pretty charts that you can show people. So this is their assets chart. So again, I've all color coordinated it with my logo colors. So you can really show them like where their money is. So like they've got a chunk in savings, they've got their investments here, pensions and property. And that's quite good actually, because you've got a good point to talk about diversification and actually accessing money and how easy it is to get at, and that most people have a majority of their money in property. And you also get a net worth chart, so you can see what your liabilities are in comparison to your whole net worth. And therefore, obviously, the older they are, the more you want that liabilities to go down. So it just gives a really good idea. And there's also a history button as well, so you can record. I haven't yet because these are just our example clients, but you can put it in year on year, so you can show how they're building up their assets really easily. Then you've got an income button. So this just shows exactly what their income has been, including the super generous interest they've got from their bank account, splitting it into dividends and salary. And I know that the other guys didn't show it, but this just shows like all the tax calculations, because some of my clients are really like big picture stuff, whereas others, you know, they want like all the detail and they want to see that all the allowances are coming off. And it looks at like your net spendable income. So shows that what they've earned after they've paid tax and national insurance, what they should have on a monthly basis. And you can say to clients, does that seem about right? And that's when they say yes or no. So this is their expenditure. Now I'm completely different to Charlotte. I make clients put it all in. So I will generally, because this is just a case study, it's quite short, I will get all my clients to put everything in. So I want to know how much they spend on a dentist, their opticians, how much they spend on Sky TV. One of the things I've got is alcohol, which we always have a giggle at. So though I wouldn't know, because mine just goes in with the food shop. So it's a real breakdown. So I actually do it as part of this, whereas Charlotte says she takes it apart and does it separately, because that way we can see exactly where their money goes. This is their beautifully coloured expenditure chart. So you can see this is the essentials, which generally covers like food. This is for their house, so council tax, mortgage and stuff. This is for their car. This is how much they're saving for their retirement at the moment. This is how much they're putting into savings. And then income tax and national insurance. So it's quite good to show it this way, because this shows they've got like a big chunk going into income tax and national insurance. Therefore, we really need to do something about that if we can in any way, by putting, you know, money into pensions or VCTs or anything like that. But also the figure that I normally have here is a really nice segment of the pie in bright pink that shows fun money. Because whilst it's all really lovely to save money for our retirement, if we're not having fun along the way, what is the point? So it's nice to see how big a chunk they've got for fun. And when you're sort of in your 40s or 50s or so, that chunk of the pie might be sort of, you know, medium-ish. But my most fun clients who are in their retirement, they live quite a frugal lifestyle, and yet their fun segment currently is about 60%. So that's awesome. So they've got lots of stars. So then this shows your income and expenditure. Ignore this chart for now, but this just shows that based on what they've got coming in after tax and national insurance, their net inflows of 131,000. Then taking into account everything they spend, they've got 75,000 they're spending. So every year they should have 55,500 left over that they're not spending. And therefore, we're assuming that they're saving that. So this is generally the time where we go back and we go, right, so I want to check at the end of every year for 55,500. And it's when most people go, So we then put in a big miscellaneous category, which is also known as Amazon, where people can, you know, decide how much actually they are spending addition every year. So we can make a much better estimate of how much they can save. So then this goes to their current position. So like the others, you can see purple is money they've got coming in, pink is money they've got coming out. So you can see that they've got that 55,500 pretty much going forwards, with your nice cars coming in every 5 years. And then you can see retiring at age 60, it drops until their state pension is kicking in, and their money from their pensions and everything. And they've still got their 5-year cars until I've decided that at 80, they're not allowed another one because they can't drive anymore. So you can literally, like, you know, build stuff in, you can change it. You know, they can spend so much on holidays every year, and then when they get to 80, you can go, no, you're not having it anymore. And like with Charlotte and Buoyant, I do it to age 100, because who knows when we're going to go. With Truth, it does build in the state pension. You can add that in and that all links through, but it doesn't do the ONS thing. But I think actually, like Charlotte, I would still always do it to 100 anyway, apart from one client who said there's no way he's getting past 90, so we've built it until 90. So then the next one shows your capital chart, so it shows how much money you've got. So this one literally just shows a massive block of colour. So I quite liked Buoyant's, the way it all worked it separately, that you could see it. But this shows it all in purple. So you can see for them, they've got way too much money. They really need to sort themselves out, because otherwise, by the time they get to 100, they could potentially have like 5.6 million, and they would have their houses, because we've kept both of their buy-to-lets. So that's like a massive problem. Right, if I could somehow move this box so I can't see everyone. Oh, here we go. Right, so you can also do the IHT planning as well. So this nicely shows if they died today, because we don't know when they're going to die. You know, they could literally drop down dead, you know, tomorrow. So it shows the value that they've got of the estate. It takes out the nil rate band for both of them because they're married, takes out the residence nil rate band because we've gifted their house to their children. And then once they've paid their inheritance tax, you know, how much the inheritance tax is going to be. And what I really like is this distribution chart. Oh, that's horrible green. I need to change it. But what I've had for lots of clients is that who've got more money than these people, is that this will split between like their 2 or 3 children, and the inheritance tax portion is as much as any one of their children, which has really helped to get people to think, actually, we really need to do something about this. Because I'm giving HMRC the same amount as I'm giving each of my children as well. So it's a really good talking point. There's lots of things you can do. You can build like what if positions. So you can build lots of different scenarios depending on what they want to do. You can kill people off and give them horrible diseases. So it's really easy to sell life assurance, income protection, critical illness, anything like that. Which they might already have, they might need to top up, or actually quite a few people recently I've got rid of it because they've got to a point they don't need it anymore. And then you've got all the things that you can do as well, just like Charlotte and Claire was showing. So if the cash flow drops down and it goes into that horrible red colour, you can work out how much more of a regular income do they need to make sure that they never run out of money. You can also chuck in a tax-free lump sum in case, you know, they might get an inheritance at some point, which you could also add in. You can change the growth rates. So you can say, well, we've assumed a 5% growth rate, but actually they're really, you know, risky people. Why don't we change it and see what it needs to be to make sure it's all purple. And then you can add more expenditure, less expenditure. You can chuck in market crashes and stuff like that as well. Because Truth is very linear as well, just like Buoyant is. So I quite liked Cash Calc, the way you could like work out, you know, sort of look at what it's done and sort of work that out. Truth doesn't do that. And to be honest, I'm like, Charlotte, I don't do market crashes either. So I just show year on year, you know, what the growth can be like and what it would work out as. Because if you do look at market crashes, then generally they do rise back up again. So hopefully your overall average will stay the same.
Well, my view is you're already taking such cautious assumptions into it. You know, I was looking at a 2% net return above inflation. So it's already a cautious enough assumption that you could argue that if you looked at that over a 50-year period, you're already, you know, taking into account market crashes in a different format. So,
yeah, exactly. I've used Truth since like 2009, so I think it's awesome. I'm so used to using the system. I know how it works. I can color coordinate it. I quite like the timeline on Buoyant. I'm sure you can do that on here, but I know I don't use like the full scope of everything that's available. So really I should go and get more training. But yeah, but I think it's cool. Right, there's loads in the chat. Have I missed anything? Any questions?
No, I think it's just been talking about reports and snipping and stuff like that, so you're fine. Any questions for Madeline?
This does all print out into Word reports, so you can like generate it so it has all your font and it just goes straight into a Word report. And then I always take chunks out and I do it very simply, and then you can just add all your logos and stuff in.
There was a question on cost, Madeline, but I think you had a breakdown of those, didn't you, for the end?
Yeah. So this is these are the costs of them. So Truth is the most expensive at 236 a month. So Voyant's a lot cheaper at 150, and obviously Cash Calc is a lot cheaper at £60. So it's really personal preference, I think, and what you're going to use it for, isn't it? And how you like using stuff. I did look at changing over to Voyant just from a purely cost point of view, and in the end I decided that I didn't have the bandwidth and I really liked Truth and I liked the colours, and I couldn't change. I
liked the colours.
I'm a girl, and it's so funny.
Thank you for fighting the good fight for me there, Madeline. We liked the colours, so we stuck with it.
I feel that I'm intelligent enough and show that to enough people that I'm allowed to be girly too.
That's fine. I would just say on the Voyant pricing, that's for the first license within any business. So secondary licenses are, I think, £90 per license. And then there's a cheaper rate for paraplanner licenses. I don't know what it is though, can't remember.
Look, it's a beautiful segue. Thank you, Emily.
Emily is predicting our presentation.
Da, da, da. This is what we charge. So Claire charges 749, Charlotte 1,000, and I charge 1,997. It's a magic 7, I was told. Yes, I first started off just doing it for free for existing clients, and then I added on, and I was like, no, I need to get people to pay for this, so I charged £250. And then I saw a lovely business coach who told me to sort myself out, have confidence in what I was offering, and I looked around at what other people charge, and I now charge that. So I will discount it slightly if, like, you know, it's a referral that's come from someone else, or they're really simple, like they've just got sort of pensions, just a couple of pensions, and therefore it's not going to take me as long. But I get enough inquiries through that it's nice that if someone can't afford it, it doesn't matter at the moment. I
think we do very little standalone financial planning. If we did more, then I might feel a bit more comfortable doing charging a little bit more for it. But we are, like Madeline's just said, we didn't used to charge for it. We used to wrap it up as part of the work we were doing, and then we realised how valuable it is for clients. So we tend to price financial planning in with their initial piece of work, which usually entails them coming in with a pension to sort out. But equally, going forward, we are picking up a few more kind of Henry high earners, not rich yet, so you can't charge them the large initial fee on their pension, and we may well be looking to increase that our fee to kind of reflect what the industry, because, you know, I've heard of people charging anywhere up to £5,000 for detailed financial planning using all three of the tools. I just think it's great that as an industry we are using financial planning, whichever the tool it is, and even if we're using our own spreadsheets as a version of it. I think it's fantastic that we're helping clients and not just kind of selling products and different funds. So it's really positive.
And I think we all said, didn't we, when we were having our chat the other week, we all said we've been through a real journey with this. So we didn't Madeline didn't jump to being like, boom, £2,000 people. Like, you do start, like I started, as Madeline said, she charged next to nothing. I think Claire said it as well. I remember I did my first proper financial plan and I charged £500 to the clients, and that felt reasonable at the time. But then after I'd tracked how much time I'd spent on it, I was like, I'm not fucking doing that again. So I think you do just go through, and also the more confident you get at presenting, the more value you start to see clients get from it, and you're like, could have charged more for that. So I think you do start to get to a place where you could, I felt like I probably would go up to £1,500 now comfortably, and charge that up front to clients. And then I think the other thing that you go through a process of is, I don't know about you and Madeline and Claire, but I went through a process of being like, oh, well, I'll offer financial planning as an option and then just go to financial advice if that feels right. But now I'm like, they have to go through financial planning to get to financial advice. There is no alternative, because if you offer it as an option, no one ever takes it up. As what I don't know if you both feel the same way about that. That's how I found it. I
think I came from a firm historically that insisted on that, and I think it's the beauty of having your own business and working your own way. is that you choose what works for you and your client. Part of the reason I didn't like the firm I work for is they insisted on this very large, very elaborate financial plan that sometimes scared people off to actually getting the advice that they needed. So as much as I would love everyone to have a financial plan, not everybody wants to pay for it or even can afford paying for it. And I think it's just really important to know what you want to do as a business and what you want to achieve. Sometimes that will mean planning, sometimes it won't. And if you want to choose for your business that everyone has a plan, that's great as well. So I think Emily's got her hand up to ask a question.
Yeah, that's all right. I just wanted to ask what people are getting for that fee. So obviously there's the prep time, there's the meeting time, and then what they get maybe afterwards, if anything.
So for me, they get all the initial like 2-hour chat to find out all about them. They fill out all the forms. This is after they've agreed to go through it, so I already know quite a lot about them. We then get the financial planning meeting, which is about another 2 hours. So we go through all that cash flow modelling that we just went through, obviously a lot slower, and we play around with it. We do all the different scenarios. I'll have also looked at everything they've already got. So most people have different pensions in different places. So I'll have analysed all of those for them. We'll have looked at, are they in the right funds? We'll have talked about attitude to risk. It'll be the recommendations of whether you should keep them where they are or whether we should transfer them, in which case how much it would, why and where would it all go, including all their ISAs and everything. And then they walk out of the meeting with the financial plan. So just all the truth stuff. And it's a PowerPoint presentation which has talked them through the situation that they're in. It has really nice emojis on it, so they can see straight away whether they're in a good place or not. They're either happy ones or they're like, we need to do something about that. And then they've got ideas boxes at the end. So they know exactly what the ideas are they've come out with, what they should be thinking about, what they should be doing, with their truth plan that says, this is, where you are. If you follow all my recommendations in the PowerPoint presentation, this is where you'll get to. And if you'd like me to make any of the changes that I've suggested, this is exactly how much I would charge and what we would do and why. And then at that point, they could say, thank you very much, Madeline. We loved it, but we never want to see you again. And they'll go and do it themselves. No one does that. Well, actually, to be fair, 2 people have done that because they've come to me purely for financial planning, which is actually like what I'm reading in the chat. And they just wanted to get a feel for where they're at, what they're doing, because they're managing it themselves. So I just charge them the $2,000. I go through everything with them, tell them that they're doing well or what they need to tweak, and then they go off again and they don't see me for a couple of years.
In my case, they just it's information gathering stage. I go through the live modules on the cash flow plan, produce the report, maybe add some additional text into the cash flow report on the Word document, and then use it at the client review meetings. We don't have a lot of clients that just use it and then go and do their own thing. We tend to prefer to have clients that we can have an ongoing relationship with as well. But I find that's where the planning really comes to life, when you do it again at their client review meeting and you show them actually this is true life now, not just assumptions. This is actually what's happened. Advice is separate and charged separately though. And we usually use kind of the traditional advice charge model, although we're constantly reviewing that.
Yeah, and I'm just fielding the questions. Jill, does anyone charge for a financial plan then discount it from the implementation fee? No, I add it on. I am not discounting it from the implementation fee. It's an extra service. It's an extra cost. They are being charged extra for it. I don't know about you two. I wouldn't discount it from advice.
I discount it only, not completely. What I do is, if you look at my charges document, it says if I'm going to set you up a new pension or whatever, I charge 1.5% initial. But then, because occasionally people don't need the full cash flow modelling. Now, 2 years ago, I would have said, well, you're not my client. This year, I'm a bit like, yay, I'm helping everyone. So there are a few really nice people who've come to me recently. They don't need the whole cash flow. I've just looked at their pensions. So I'll charge them 1.5% to transfer their pensions into something so they can draw it down. But if you've been through the whole cash flow modelling and you've got what I sort of consider enough money, then I'll only charge 1% for transferring all that stuff and doing the initial advice.
Yeah, and I'm different again, in that I will discount that fixed fee off the percentage fee if they do go ahead for advice. But again, my charges are a little bit lower on that side, so it has less of a detrimental impact, and my percentage charges are a bit higher, so it probably works out very similar. But if they've paid me up front for planning and then they go on and pay a chunky fee for advice, I will deduct that planning fee from the advice.
I don't work on percentages, so I think that's probably why I'm different. It's £1,000 for financial planning. It's whatever it costs to do the financial advice based on what it is. So yes, I was saying yesterday, I said to clients, it's £1,000 for financial planning. We've done that. I can bill you for that. If you want me to go ahead and do the financial advice, it's another 2.5 grand. And so it'll be 3.5 in total. And I didn't really want to do the work. And they're like, yeah, please. I was like, oh, so not that I mean to sound ungrateful. I just wasn't really in the mind space to do it. So Emily, is your hand still up, or is that from last time? Are you trying to put your hand down now?
Charlotte, Jill has put, that's interesting, charging a fee for cash flow planning. That Paul, what's his name? Is that Armstrong? Always insists not to charge for it. And I look at that as maybe he always talks about, you know, he drives in his car and he pulls up at this massive house and it's one of the footballers from Man U or whatever. My clients don't have enough money to like a footballer. So therefore, he's sort of like giving away a freebie to go, you know, look how great this is. You've got to get, you know, you've got to do everything I say, and then he'll just, you know, carry on making hundreds of thousands because these people are minted. Whereas my clients are normal people. So therefore they need to pay that initial rate. So I do work, and also it helps because I don't have to do anything product wise afterwards. You know, it's nice if I transfer their pensions or they set up investments or whatever, but it's not necessary because that work I've done initially, I have been paid for. So it's just nice as an extra if they do anything else.
And I also think if you're doing it as a standalone exercise, you begrudge spending the time on it less because you're going to get paid regardless. Do you know what I mean? So like I compare it to, this is a complete sidebar, I compare it to, I needed my son's tongue tie divided when he was a baby. And there was one woman who said, I won't charge you if he doesn't need it done, or I'll charge you 150 if he does need it done. There was another woman who said, I'm going to charge you £60 for the assessment regardless, and then I'll only charge you up to 150 maximum if he does need it done. And I went with the latter because I felt like, well, I feel like that first person's incentivized to definitely tell me he's got tongue tie. Whereas the other woman, I was like, well, if he doesn't need it, she's still getting paid. So she won't just pretend that he needs to have this procedure when he doesn't. And I think there's a little bit of that here. So like, if we don't charge up front, we're almost like forcing like that little bit extra on them. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think if we're just like, look, for this it's this, and if we go forward then it's more, sort of thing. That's my view anyway.
I think there's a bit of a hybrid as well. You can set up examples, can't you? We've got a couple of different client scenarios, and we might, just to give them an example of this, kind of like what we're doing today, really. This is what client scenario might look like in cash flow planning, and this is the benefit of it, and that's all part of your free initial review if that is what you do, but that at least gives them a flavor of how this could look for them, and they almost then talk themselves into it, wanting to put their details into this wonderful system. And I have had people say, oh, can I have a play around with that system, and they can't, and I'm kind of glad they can't, because having been using it for years and years and years, I can still go wrong occasionally. So putting that in a client's hand could be quite dangerous, but equally, you know, I think it's good to show them an example of how it works, other than making it very specific for them for free, because it is a lot of work, isn't it, to do that. But again, if that's in your business model and you find that gets you business, then it might work for some people.
Though you say that, Truth are just bringing out some really simplified version that you could even put on your website. So a client could put in their details, really, really simple. They get a really simple cash flow just to sort of say, this is what I do. Isn't it awesome? Come to me and we'll do it properly. So we'll see how that works.
I don't know. Don't you think people would just go, oh, well, I've got what I need now. Bye.
Well, I don't think so, really. What happens if it all works out red? And they'd be like,
well, that's true. One clients when they only come to you if it all comes out red though. Right, any more questions? We've gone over. Any more? No, we're good. All right.
I mean, all of the systems, they offer, I think, just like a free trial period, don't they? I know I had a free trial period with Voyant when I was looking at it, and I'm sure Truth probably do as well. So I can't see not having it anymore. You know, as part of my business, there's no way I could go back to not having it. It's just integral for what I do, and clients truly value it. So I would definitely say, you know, go and get all the trials and just see what suits you.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Emily, no, I've never had a colourblind client, as far as I know. But they've mentioned. Anyone else have to deal with colourblindness when it comes to cash flow modelling?
No, really good question though, but no, I haven't had it as yet.
Oh. There you go. Right, okay guys, good to speak to you all. I'm finishing the recording.